welcome to another episode of that Grief Relief podcast. I'm Katie, and today's episode is very, very slightly different as the podcast evolves into very much the overarching umbrella of mental health in general. So I'm really pleased to be joined by a good friend of mine who is actually a professional in this kind of industry, Ben Edwards. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm really good, thanks very much. And I will do everything in my power to not...
To not meow. Yeah, that's very good. If you could do that again, yeah. I'll do everything in my power not to woof or bark.
Did you know she was there?
Stealth.
Look at her looking at you. Sorry, that's my cat Poppy, who's very famous on the podcast. I was gonna say I'll do my best to not do a Manchester accent, and also as well. I think she's looking at you like that because she knows you're from the north.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, she wants you out of my house.
I think she's embracing it. Everyone loves the northerners. It's the southerners that are a little bit...
Ben Edwards, on a more of a serious note, why are you here? No. What?
I don't know. You just slate me every time I'm round, so I have no idea.
You are, as far as I know, and the titles that I understand, is you are... Poppy. You are a mental health in the workplace specialist, if you like.
Yeah,
and you're qualified in that.
I've done different qualifications to get to that standard. So not in the professional sense of like psychiatric or psychology training, but I've done mental health courses that enable me to fit into that bracket.
Okay. And for those listening that perhaps don't understand like what that even entails, tell us more.
Well, I suppose I fell into it by accident. So one of my previous roles when I was in the UK, I worked for a bank and we had to do a lot of work around people who are facing vulnerable situations. So that meant whether it be physical vulnerability or mental vulnerability that impacted your ability to repay debts.
Oh.
So one of the things that came out from like the Financial Conduct Authority, which kind of governs a lot of the UK finance, they wanted banks and financial institutions to put a lot more emphasis on supporting people that found themselves in those situations. So it was very much a new thing, and it was just tasked to me to create some content around it. But then I got into it so much and did a lot of background research and things like that, and I started to learn more. So over the course of 5 years, I just become the expert in the business on it. So helping out a lot of the other areas that had to put similar things in. And then from there, I started my own company and went into another business to kind of completely revamp their process on it. So it wasn't just training their staff to deal with this. It was also being integral in making sure their policy and their processes were correct. And stuff. It's going crazy.
Yeah, she's going mad, isn't she?
So yeah, and then we came to the U.A.E. to Dubai, and I wanted to do something similar. And obviously, doing a little bit of checking, there wasn't much at all. So
this is the thing. So full disclosure, you work for Ignite Training, which is owned by my brother Russell. Yeah. Big name on that Grief Relief podcast.
Twice.
Yeah.
It gets
Did you see what she just did?
Just little.
Yeah, she's just a little bit like.
This is definitely going to be the Poppy show. This one, isn't it? So.
This is hilarious. Yeah. So, and we've spoken. We've actually, I've interviewed you a number of times on the radio and things like that because it is, as you know, a subject that is incredibly close to my heart, given the fact that I've lost two people from my work in the last 18 months to suicide. And two people of whom would never have expected it within a million years. And it's one of those things where you always think, I should have asked them more, or I should have checked in on them more, and all of those kind of things. And actually, one of the biggest things that, because I've done a few of your courses through lockdown, was, always ask twice, how are you?
Yeah.
Because if you ask once, everyone says I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm okay. And then ask again, which we'll get into in a moment. But yeah, so we've spoken about it a lot more in depth into...
Levels all changed.
I literally have no clue if it's recording. And yes, we've spoken at length about how far the U.A.E. has to come. I mean, even the UK and
everywhere.
the US and everywhere has a long way to come. So the U.A.E. definitely has a long way to come. So first of all, what I was going to do, God, I can't even speak. What I did for this episode was I put a question box on the Instagram.
Okay.
Because I just thought, you know what? This is very different to all the episodes we've done.
Yep. And
I thought, why not utilize it to actually see if people did genuinely have any concerns, full stop.
Yeah.
And we do. I have lots of questions that have come up from both perspectives, really. An employer...
How long have we got?
Pardon?
How long have we got?
Oh, yeah, that's true, yeah. Ben loves a chat like me, and so this.
I don't shut up.
This is going to be a really interesting podcast for anybody listening. So, but before we get into it,
right.
I want to know. Might sound like a really silly question, but why is mental health in the workplace important? Surely you just get on with it. That's not what I believe. But I know it's a lot of people think.
So, why is health in the workplace important?
So you can do your job.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah, but you can't see mental health. And I mean that quite genuinely.
I know.
You know, if I've got a broken ankle and I ring into work and I say I've broken my ankle, they wouldn't expect me to come to work. If I, by the way, I don't work anywhere. I work for myself. So this is very, very much, what's the word?
Hypothetical.
Thank you, hypothetical. But yet, if I were to ring up and say, I'm having a bit of an anxiety attack, or I'm having like a really down day, or whatever,
but
you would think the majority would say...
Okay, so I've got a really bad stomach.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know? It's your coffee. But, so it's exactly... But, so, yeah. But...
Okay.
That is one of those things, again, where... I don't know if it's commonplace everywhere, but you can go some places with like your physical health where you feel like your work won't ask you any questions because it's like, oh yeah, I've got a really bad stomach or women's problems, however you might pitch that. Then people kind of go, oh, okay. But there's no proof of that. I know
True.
You use the example of a broken ankle, broken leg.
That's
all right, there's a cast.
Okay.
So you can see things. So people can sympathize and empathize with things that they can see. It's easier for them to grasp that concept.
Yeah.
But you're right, because we can't see mental health and because not everybody understands it, we find it very difficult to relate to other people because of that. And because of the stigma, one of the courses that I did, 2014 maybe, one of the bits about that was the history of mental health in the UK. Okay. So up until the 1970s, the UK still had what people might refer to as asylums, putting people into a mental health institute where they kind of they were supported, but there was also the kind of concept of like, let's keep everyone, sectioned is the kind of thing that was used.
In the 70s?
Still up to then, yeah. Like a lot of them only started to close by then, a lot of them started a bit earlier, but yeah, up until then, we still had that. And like you read some of the things that just used to happen over the last 100 years, people who were experiencing this because it was unknown, they were experimented on, they were kind of to see what was going on because it was so unusual. And the unfortunate thing is, in a lot of countries that aren't as established as a lot of the Western areas, they either see it as something that is a bad thing. It could be down to their systematic beliefs that it is something forced upon you because of something bad that you've done, so that's why you're facing that. It could be that it's a sort of disability of sorts, so it's something that's affected. So if you're not fully able, let's cast you aside. So it's a bit of a difficult thing like that there's still a lot of room to come.
It's interesting because in episode 20 was a guy called Athul who's from India, and it's a quote that's posted on my Instagram account. Is he actually said, "In my culture, mental health isn't a thing." And that's what he said.
Yeah. Well, I had to train people in India. So when I worked in the finance industry, I went over to India, and again, it was a completely alien concept to a lot of them. And again, like, if I mentioned this at home, I'd be looked at like, well, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, don't talk about this. It's a taboo, or it's a taboo, or just like a no-go area completely.
I don't think this is a cultural thing. I very much just think this is a human thing, is just general work ethics. So even I think, and I've been guilty of this as well, is when you do have something that is more mental health than physical health, you just think, I'll just suck it up and I'll just carry on. I'll just go into work.
Yeah, if you've got that mindset, and I suppose it's also from a corporate point of view, the business point of view, is how that's perceived in that business. Because if that business does see it as, health is health, if you're not feeling great on that day, we understand that you're not going to be as productive. Is it best for you to take that day off rather than just be a unproductive bum on the seat? So you tick one box for being in, but you don't tick all the other boxes to get your job done. Or whether it's one that does value that and they just go, well, we don't care, just come in and then...
And I think it's perhaps from both sides as well, isn't it? It depends whether you do you have an approachable work environment whereby you can say, I'm going through a bad time and whatever. And I know certainly a lot of people that I know that we've spoken about, not that we've spoken about any of your clients, but what I just mean in general is that, and even when I interviewed you on the radio, the text messages that came in of people saying, I would never tell my boss that I was couldn't come in because I was having a bout of depression or whatever. And that's sad.
Yeah,
it's really
of course
sad.
it is. And that's kind of part and parcel of removing the stigma, is people have got to be more vocal about it. And I really understand, well, I suppose understand is the wrong word. I respect that some people will feel that by vocalizing that they could be then frowned upon because of the lack of knowledge and understanding of other people. But it's like everything that's like a wave, a change in people's perceptions, is you've got to have those people that are a bit more outspoken, a bit more vocal, that just say, look, this is important. I'm telling you because, I really want my health to be in a good place. And if it's not, then I can't be as productive as what you expect me to be. But if I take some time to be able to recuperate, just as I would recuperate from that broken ankle that we mentioned, then I can be back to 100%. But I just need the time and the support to do that. And at the moment, here in the U.A.E, people don't get the time for that generally. Obviously, it can go under regular sick days. But the help is the next thing that really needs to kind of push through.
And that's interesting you say that, which does lead us on very nicely, Ben. Thank you very much for that segue. Into the questions that were given, because one of them was, she says, looking at her phone. What did you just say? Oh, yes, right at the top. Here we go. One of the questions saying, with access to resources being readily available in the UK and knowing how valuable that access is to people, how do you feel knowing that the subject is still very taboo in the U.A.E, and especially why is mental health not covered under insurance? Now, I know that it is for some insurance companies. And
that's the important thing.
The difference of, when you get your medical insurance card and you're thinking, okay, am I going to be platinum? Am I silver? Am I titanium? And you're like, copper? Like, what do I get for this? But in all seriousness, like, it is covered, but why is it not?
Well, it depends. So it depends on your coverage, not just the type, but also the provider as well. So generally, there are some companies that if they are a company that is very much global and does have Western presence, you tend to find that they've got it even part of their basic package. Some of the other providers that are probably more regional based, they're the ones that tend not to, but I have seen that there's quite a few of them starting to include it.
Oh, you have seen it being changed slightly?
Yeah. There's quite a few providers now that are starting to bring it through, even on the basic kind of package. But again, it's limited, so it's either a cap on funds or a number of sessions.
Okay.
So it might be, you can't spend more than 5,000 dirhams on psychiatric or psychological help.
And but off of the back of that as well is, and again from personal experience of a friend of mine, didn't want to use their company insurance because then thought their HR would know about it and would then in turn, but I thought that has to be private.
I'm not.
I don't know.
Again,
I'm really putting you on the spot.
I would expect that from that perspective. Then yes,
but
they should be able to see what it's being used for, but not individually. So they should, as a company, you should be able to see what types of medical support are being used. So you might see that some sessions of mental health support was used, but my understanding is that it shouldn't divulge.
And it's such a shame that that's a genuine concern, isn't it, as well? I guess
of course it is.
That's obviously why we're here. I'm going to continue with our little Q&A session.
Well, part of that question was also based on the UK. So my understanding, yes, they have quite a way to go here in the U.A.E, but I wouldn't necessarily say that the U.A.E as a country is seeing it less as a taboo. They're obviously very open about it. They want to change the mental health. It's part of their ongoing agendas. It's taken a bit of time to come through, but they are focusing on it. It's from, again, my perspective, and not kind of tarring all the companies with the same brush, because obviously they're very, very different. But from my experience and what I'm seeing is it's more the companies not doing this off their own back and waiting for the U.A.E to put something in place that's law before they do anything. So of course we've had a number of companies come to us, want to implement some mental health support, and we provide them with what we can do, because it's not just limited to a training session. Sorry, Ignite.
Okay,
we can support companies if they want us to come in and do a more rounded wellbeing program. We can focus on that, but then unfortunately companies see the dirham signs and go, we're not at that point yet. But as a company, why don't you jump the gun and be someone that's at the forefront of this and
leader?
I know it's not the be all and end all, because we want people to be comfortable talking about mental health generally, but be a pioneer about this, and have your name in lights because you're doing this. Like, think about the publicity that you would get as a company and the people that you will attract if you do this, and then you're ahead of the curve. So when the U.A.E do issue their new policies that say you have to do these things, you can just sit back and go, well, yeah, we've done this, we're all right, we're good.
And that is such a big thing in the Middle East, isn't it? It's like, I mean, the award shows that I host, there's an award for everything, because everybody wants that accolade in the front. So in the in their foyer or whatever. We're getting there. I think they are, and I mean, I guess you obviously have experienced that. I was going to ask you who you work with in the U.A.E, but you probably won't tell me, so I'm not going to. Right. Continuing with question number 2, Ben Edwards.
Go on.
I haven't reworded these. I haven't. I'm literally just reading them from Instagram. We have made a lot of changes in our business recently, and I have a team member that is really struggling. Can I just, prefix that Ben is not a psychiatrist. He's not a therapist. He's not anything. So
I'm not anything.
that.
Just some guy I'm asking questions.
Who's that?
It's Poppy. Poppy's trying to get back in.
Yes, thank you. It's Namshi. Right, Ben, you are something. So
that sounds even worse.
Yeah, I know.
God,
you're something else.
Something,
you are.
Yeah.
What I meant was you say it better than I do. Say what I'm trying to say.
So yeah, I'm not a I'm not a practitioner of mental health. Like I'm not a professional in that sense. And do you know what? Like sometimes like people speak to me and they go, "Oh, you're a mental health expert." I'm not even that. And one, because I hate blowing my own trumpet. I'm not really someone that likes to shout about what I do. I do it because I like to. If it's good, then good. That's what I want. I'm not really bothered whether you think it is or not. I just do what I do. That's the way I see things.
Yeah.
But what I am is someone who is knowledgeable about something that is important to me and I think is important to everyone else.
Yep.
They just either don't understand it and they need to understand it. So I like to be considered an educator on that. You know, I will tell you what I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not an expert going like a lecturer standing at the front with degrees behind me about these things.
Yeah, I get what you're saying from that. But again, obviously, you don't want to blow your own trumpet. I will blow your trumpet. That you know, I believe you are an expert in this. You've studied this. You've worked in this field for 5-6 years,
7,
which doesn't sound like a long time, as you say. And like, you know, I've got 30 years experience and all of that. You've worked with some big companies in the UK. Yeah. Reel some off if you're allowed to.
I could just say the companies that I used to work for, surely. It's
as in like the companies that you worked for, mental health.
Oh, right, yeah. Special. So Mind, charities, Samaritans. I worked with the Money Advice Trust.
Okay.
So
see, so I do believe that you are an expert in your field. However, I was just caveating that because, you know, it's not like you're a Dear Deirdre and this is like a problem page, right?
So I will give the knowledge that I'm aware of and what it sounds like to me. But and just like we say to everyone else that we train and work with, knowing this information does not make you an expert. So, you know, I've had it a few times over here when I've spoken to people in the kind of mental health field, and they go, well, the thing is, if we give this information to people, they might see themselves as a professional and start diagnosing problems to people and saying, you have this.
Right.
But then I always think, well, for many of years when people have known about physical problems, like you can't diagnose whether someone's got a sprained or a strained muscle, but you know that if you experience that, then you should use RICE, you know, rest, ice, elevate, compress and elevate. Yeah. So people know that because it's general knowledge. Yeah. So why don't people in the mental health space feel comfortable to just go, let's give this knowledge to people to empower them? Of course it doesn't make you someone who can diagnose, but at least you identify the signs and go, well, do you know what you're explaining there sounds like it could be this, but I'm not someone who can diagnose, but here are some things that I've heard could work. I just don't see why people don't see it.
No, I certainly, that doesn't seem like a negative thing, and genuinely, even in the short amount of time that we've known each other over the last few years, and the time that I spent with you and the interviews I've done with you, I've learned things in terms of, I mean, this is going off slightly, but in terms of low moods, just being low moods going on for periods of time, that is then moving into depression and, you know, those kind of things, and just understanding differences. So now we've finished blowing your trumpet.
Right, go on.
Let's go back to question number 2. It says here, we have made a lot of changes in the business recently, and I have a team member that is really struggling with these changes, and I think it's genuinely making her depressed. I can't change what the business want from her role, but I have to manage her. How do I do this? Tough love, empathize, but how do you do this as a middle manager without sounding disloyal? This lady is 59. She's been with the company for 26 years. Okay. Upper management has zero sympathy or empathy, so it's down to me to manage this, and I don't have a clue. That's tough.
Yeah. And the biggest thing about that is upper management that's your problem right there.
And she, I actually messaged her back to try and get a little bit more information. Right, okay. And she literally just, because I said, have you spoken to upper management? And she said, yeah. They literally just said, we pay her enough money. If she doesn't like it, she can leave. That's what they said.
And so ultimately that's your problem. If that's how those upper management feel about something like this.
But how does that help this person?
Of course, yeah. So
I'm not saying you can't
give us something good.
Well, it doesn't help me, Ben, actually, for the podcast. So if you can...
So I think from this person's perspective as a middle manager, we've got to be careful how I say this, because again, like, I'm aware of some of this, but what I say to most people is, although it sounds difficult, the easiest thing to do is speak to that person. Understand
the
their
person who she thinks is going into depression.
And I suppose there's a couple of things in that is very difficult to support without the kind of knowledge. So I know you said you asked her for a bit more information. So the company are going through changes. Well, most people might know that when companies are going through changes, people deal with that differently.
Yeah.
So yes, some people might be in denial about it, and some people might not want to continue with the company because of the direction they're going. Some people find it very difficult to change because, if she's been in the business 26 years, did you say?
Yeah.
Maybe the business has been so similar for that long, she's kind of set in her ways a bit. And I'm just making assessments based on what that is, but that could be something completely different. So yes, this person could be miserable because they've been in a business for so long and now it's going in a different direction that they're not comfortable with. So they are finding that difficult. So, even if you think of it from a managerial perspective, if you have a conversation with that person and understand what is making them feel the way they are. So again, I wouldn't approach it and say, you look very depressed. I can see that your mood has changed. That's an easy way to say it. You're saying something that you've identified behaviourally.
Nice.
So it's very difficult for someone to say,
language
no,
is very important.
Of course. Because as soon as you go, you're depressed, you're labelling that person with something that you don't really have an idea about. Because, you mentioned low mood is not depression. So I've noticed that your behaviour has changed, your mood has changed. If that person goes, no, I haven't, then you can generally use tangible things to go, well, I've noticed that you're not engaging with people as much. So just like when you're giving feedback to someone, you've got to give things that they can relate to. If you just
examples,
if you just make something up about what your perception of it is, someone can argue that and go, no, it isn't. And it's just two perceptions arguing against.
Right.
But
so
if you say behavioural things, you go, these are the things that I've identified, it's a bit more difficult for someone to argue with that. But then they're more likely to kind of recognise that those things have changed within themselves and then be open to a bit more of a frank conversation, especially if you approach it from a nice angle. If you're having a go at them, I've noticed that you're of course you've got to show that. Which
sounds like an obvious thing, but
some people don't. And again, it's the way in which you approach things as well. If you're someone who does think, why don't people just get on with this, and you approach conversation in that way, that person's never going to ever speak to you again, never going to confide in you. But if you tap into what element of empathy you might have within you, I always say, don't listen to answer, listen to understand. So you're not there to give solutions, because most people just want to talk and express, and that old saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. So once people have generally talked about it, that's half of the battle, because then they go, weight off my shoulders, weight off my chest, I've finally spoken to someone about this, someone else knows about it, there could be some change. But then as a manager, you've got to identify, can I help with these things that they've talked about? Can I guide this person through this change? If you're familiar with change management, it could be they just need more information about the change. It could be that they need to be given more direction in terms of their role. All sorts of things like
That's
that
really
might
interesting.
help.
Because it doesn't mention here whether this person has already had that conversation. So so even like step one, maybe it is just a case of don't assume anything, ask the question. How did you word it again? Sorry, I've noticed a change of mood.
I've noticed that your mood's changed. So you don't seem yourself. That's always a nice thing. And then when people go, what do you mean? Then you can say, well, you've been a little bit more distant, or
so at least
I've not seen you smile for a long time, and then people go, oh God, maybe I haven't. So
that's interesting, that change management. It could just literally be of like, how do you guide them through this? And especially later in life, she's 59, right? This person that has been mentioned, and it's probably, she probably isn't just like, well, I can't leave because I'm not going to get another job elsewhere. That's probably a
potentially
thing. Okay, that's really interesting. I want to do that thing. They're like, I hope that's helped if you're listening.
But have the conversation, and then I think the main thing for that manager is just say, like, don't feel like you need to solve that problem. If that person is potentially experiencing some form of depression or low mood, if it's been going on for a long period of time, it's not your responsibility to get them out of that. It's a professional's responsibility, and it's that person's responsibility. You can help and support if you have the capability to. So again, if that person says to you, I'm finding it really difficult because now that the business has changed, I'm not getting the support I need to. Well, as a manager, should you provide that support? Is it something that you need to do differently?
Yeah.
So if you provide that support, that person's behaviour might change, and you might see, they're no longer feeling in that low mood or experiencing what they perceived as depression.
Yeah.
So this is for all people, like having conversations with someone who they think may be experiencing low well-being or poor mental health, is you are not there to solve the problem. You are there to listen, help if you can, if it's in your remit to do so, like you have the power or the ability to help. But then the thing is, just like with physical health, you can't mend that broken leg or put the shoulder back in if it was dislocated. That's a professional's job. So do the same with mental health. This is something that I can't help you with. It's important for you to go and seek help where you can. And
it's same like anything, as you say. Again, I always relate it back to physical health when we talk about mental health, because if you were poorly, if you were sick, I would say to you, will you go to the doctor? Will you please, if you got bad back, will you please go to a physio? And I'll push you. Yeah. But I am genuinely, as you know, a huge advocate of therapy, and I'm a strong advocate for it because I was so against it, and then it was a convert. Then I was converted, and so I do say to people, or even I've spoken about it before, I used one of the apps. It's called BetterHelp. Not sponsored. Love to be if you want to sponsor. But it was easy. It was nice. I didn't need to actually speak to someone. You can speak to them. You can do video call. But it was like just on text. And it was just nice to just chat to someone that didn't know anything related. So anyway. Question number 3. Here we go. Ooh. Okay, again, haven't reworded this one.
Right, okay.
Where do employers draw a line between mental health and someone not performing? Meaning, if one member of the team is overwhelmed by a workload that everyone else is managing fine, but they're complaining or gossiping and generally creating an unpleasant workload, but then citing mental health when addressed.
Again, it's difficult without knowing more context, but we all know in the workplace that people respond differently to different processes, problems and things like that. So if everyone else is doing this, I've always got to go back to, are you sure that that person has all the tools available to them to do that? If we're doing this completely like for like, they've had all the same training, they've had all the same support. I think sometimes what happens is when managers experience someone that is a bit of a problem, or they perceive as a problem, and everyone else is doing it right, then they lay off that support because they just go, well, why should I waste my time? And then inadvertently, that lack of support then drives that person's behaviour, and they get less and less performed. So where the employer draws the line is, in the worst possible sense, of course you can get rid of that person if they're not performing to the standards that you set out in the business. Yeah. But are you doing everything as an employer, as a manager, to help support that person? So, if they are struggling, what have you done to ensure that they can do that? And if it's something that they're just not performing, they're not doing it, having that frank conversation, just go, look, what is preventing you from doing this? And if it is really mental health, then the question is, well, if this job is impacting your mental health, maybe it's not the right thing for you. Maybe it is for you to look for another job elsewhere, whether that's a different function. Whether, can you help and support them, move them to a different place?
Why would it be then? Again, I don't know any context of this at all. But why would it be? So as you're saying, so if this person's saying, okay, well, say I'm your manager, and I say to you, okay, you're not performing in this, and you say, I'm going through a really tough time, and I think I've got anxiety or depression, whatever. Okay. I think what they're trying to say is why you almost want to go, well, everyone else is all right. But to me, I read that as sort of going, but that you don't know what's happening in that person's life. Yeah. So I guess it's again asking the question and having the conversation.
Understand what's driving
So yeah. And I guess you have to believe people initially.
Yeah, of course.
That's always tough too,
I know, and there's
it?
always that skepticism about things, to just go, but then, you know, if it's something that keeps cropping up, then again, that person who's saying it's mental health issues has a responsibility to help themselves. So if they're constantly just going, it's my mental health, as a manager or a business, I'd be going, well, what steps are you taking to do that? How can we as a business potentially help you? And, you know, maybe your business doesn't have insurance that offers that, but again, that person should see that as, this is my health. And just because my business doesn't provide that as my insurance, I should take steps to do that. And I think the beauty of things now is, because a lot of the therapy and support is done remotely because of the world that we're in right now, you can reach out to people in your home country and have a conversation. So if you think the U.A.E is very expensive, it is an expensive place to live, you know, and medical care is expensive if you don't have the right thing. Is, well, can you reach out to someone in your home country? My
counsellor's in the UK.
All right, there you go then. So
I mean, no offence to counsellors in the U.A.E, but it's much cheaper.
So I'm not trying to take the business away from them.
No, of course.
But all companies are doing it now. You know, virtual training can happen anywhere in the world. You look for what companies are reputable and reach out. So.
I also do understand that some people, again, I've touched on this before, some people, if it's allowed, and obviously we've been very lucky in the U.A.E, they prefer to be in a physical space and with that person. I get that, and I must admit I was really hesitant to have a counselling session on Zoom. I was like, what? I don't, because at that point Zoom was very corporate, wasn't it? And I was like, I don't really understand, but it's amazing. Okay. Ooh, this is short and sweet. Question number 4. How can I talk to my boss about my mental health?
Talk to them.
Go on.
Again, it's your own perception of how that conversation is likely to go, and based on what you know about your boss. So you might think, if I do say this to them, the way they've approached other problems or talked about mental health, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Is there someone else that you can talk to in the business? But ultimately, we've got to get in a place where we do feel comfortable speaking to people.
So sorry to interrupt you, from the very, very base level, how would you initially approach that? I guess it depends on the company, I suppose, but is it an email? Do you have 5 minutes? Is it?
I'd always talk about it where possible, face to face, or, you know, if you're in a remote working environment, can I have 5-10 minutes on Zoom?
Yeah.
I'm experiencing a difficult situation at the moment.
Yeah.
Feel free to disclose as much as you wish, but make sure that you're saying, you know, how it's making you feel. You know, I'm finding it very difficult to focus. I'm struggling. I get into a bit of a flow and then I'm immediately distracted. Whatever is causing me this anxiety, depression, whatever it might be, is having this impact. I feel I need support, or I think this might help me. You know.
Yeah. Okay.
Just reaching out to them and just letting them know, again, is kind of like half the battle, just to make yourself feel a little bit relieved. You know, carrying what you might see as a burden, or just carrying this problem that you're experiencing all by yourself, is only going to drive worse feelings within you.
And I also think as well, if you're listening and this is something that's affecting you, there's also sometimes you can't vocalize how you're feeling.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert, I would still recommend literally saying that to your manager or your boss, and just saying, I don't know, I don't feel like I have any reason to be anxious or stressed or whatever, or depressed, whatever you want to label or not label it. I just know that I'm not focused and I think it's affecting work or whatever. I would strongly believe that even that is better than just saying, well, I can't describe it. but tell them if they can see that you genuinely don't even know how to get those words out.
Yeah.
I have like these huge, this huge amount of sympathy for people that can't. I've always been extremely fortunate to work in companies with open door policies and what have you. The irony of that is that, my previous manager, extremely open door policy, and he in turn has taken his own life. And that's what, to me, it just blows my mind, because he was such an incredible leader, not a manager. He was a leader of our business. And I would speak to him about anything, and he'd take the mick out of me every day. And and I would speak to him very openly about lots of things. And then for him to then, I'm like, it's just,
Yeah.
Anyway, question number 5.
Go on.
Running a small business, especially in 2021, can be challenging. As a business owner, what can I do to make sure I'm prioritising the mental health of both myself and my employees? That's a nice question.
Yeah.
Great.
So here in the U.A.E, I assume.
I can't assume, I'm afraid. Well, I genuinely, I don't know where that's from.
Anywhere in the world.
I mean, let's base it on the U.A.E.
Well, take the steps to provide support to your employees that is what your business can afford. Obviously, being a small business, it's quite difficult managing costs. So if you can provide an insurance policy that gives some mental health support, great. At least it's one step. If you can afford to have an employee assistance program, fantastic.
What's that?
So an employee assistance program is usually provided by a company that will have people on call 24/7 most of the time, that you can call, and it's not just for mental health, it's for any problem that you might be facing. So a lot of them deal with like financial issues, legal issues, and what they will do is they kind of have the conversation with you, and then they have people within their kind of bank of resources that are experts, so they're vetted, they have professional qualifications, and then you can speak to them, and it's usually a set annual fee per employee.
That's a service here in the U.A.E?
Yeah, there's quite a few providers, not to name any specific, but there are a number of providers. So if you look for an employee assistance program, I think they can range from, I think if you've got a large company base, I think sometimes it can be about $15-20 per employee per year.
Wow,
maybe.
Okay, right.
If you've got a large number, I think if you've got less people, then the price goes up. But they can be quite reasonably priced. And in terms of effectiveness, they're really good because they're confidential. So nothing comes back to the business about what you're going through. And they will probably only need to share information if it's something that they need to get support. So, for example, again, not something that I'm familiar happens in the U.A.E, but again, coming from the UK, your occupational health. Yep. So if you have a particularly bad back, then they will provide you with an ergonomic chair.
You're right.
So usually through the company, you will get in touch with their healthcare program, and they will do that.
My brother-in-law was an ergonomist.
Sounds like something.
Yeah, he used to work do stuff for Barclays Bank, for example, and then I got him to come in. He was here in the U.A.E,
right?
And I got him to come into a couple of places, just basic stuff,
yeah,
really random that you just don't think about.
Yeah,
laptops and chair positions.
And because that's usually like managed by the business itself, but in a similar concept, like if they needed to implement something to support you from the employee assistance program, my understanding, I might be wrong in a little bit this, but they may need to share information in order to make that thing happen. Right. But ultimately, they're confidential.
Well, that's something that's available here in the U.A.E. And what about, because this is the first thing that came into my mind, and I don't want to be that meme where it's companies saying, we respect everyone's mental health. Oh, can we have some, extra days off for a mental health? No, but we'll give you yoga once a month. Yeah. But is there, again, for a small business, is there anything that you would recommend to make sure that culture is still in a good place and mental health is in a good place? Is it team building? Is it a monthly dinner? Or I don't know, do you know what I mean?
So in my mind and from my perspective, that's well-being.
Okay.
So mental health is your ability to manage difficult situations, how resilient you are to problems, and in order to still continue, maybe like not experiencing pain or discomfort because of things that are going on in your mind, essentially.
Okay.
Wellbeing is about mental health,
Yeah.
but also physical health and social well-being.
Right.
So you've got like 3 arms generally to well-being.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go much wider than that. You know, there's some schools of thought that might say well-being includes like financial well-being as well. But of course, as a business, if you want to keep people's mental health, then you've got to look at the other 2 as well. So creating social situations where possible, team building events, anything that kind of keeps people engaged. But remember that everybody's different. Some people hate team building stuff, but if you put those things on, then it's up to those people to make use of them.
Yeah,
but,
true.
Yeah, physical health, you know, whether you provide, you know, participate in the
gym membership or something.
Yeah, or participate in the, what is it, Spinneys 92?
Spinneys 92.
And
that was random. That is a cycle race here in Dubai.
Yeah,
but
but
you just pluck that out.
Well, because it's
a corporate.
You could do you could do a marathon. You could get engaged.
Yeah,
I know it's a bit tricky over here for doing things for charity unless you're registered. But if you do have that functionality, you know, doing something that gives back. So again, if
is that CSR?
Corporate social responsibility. Yeah, so you can do those things that are giving back to people. And again, giving is something that's considered a big thing within wellbeing. You know, if you're giving back to people, society, then that usually boosts your own well-being. So.
And going back to the mental health of a small team, it's just, I guess it would be from and we need to actually touch on, because they asked how do they look after their mental health, but I suppose we've kind of touched on that. But if it's a small team and a small business, I guess it's your responsibility as a manager to try and keep an eye on everyone and see if there are changes in moods and personalities.
Yeah. And I suppose it is a bit easier if you're a small business to be able to do that. So at Ignite, we're a small business. We know kind of how each other is.
Yeah.
It's not just the responsibility of Russell.
Right, okay.
Even though ultimately he is as a director, but you know, we all kind of speak to one another, and that's the beauty of having a small team. But then
of course.
Just because you might be in a large corporation, that doesn't mean it should be any different from your small team. You know, why can't you make sure that you help and support each other? You know, have that chat once a week even, just to go like, how is everybody feeling? You know, take work off the table. How's people's weekends been? What did you do? You know, some people might just go, I didn't do anything. I just sat in and watched Netflix. All right. And how do you feel after that? Oh, yeah, I caught up with a few things. I feel okay. I just needed to relax. It might be that person goes, I don't feel great about it. I wish I'd done something. All right, well, next weekend, why don't we do something? You know, just help and support each other. And if you as the, director, business owner, whoever, if you lead that process, then you're going to encourage your employees to do the same thing. So lead by example.
Lead by example. Can you turn the mic very slightly towards you?
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, it's a little bit weak. That's a Dragon Mart special. Question number 6.
All right. I can count.
It's my podcast, Ben.
Thought you might want to break. You've done 5 now.
Read it yourself. Question number 6. I'd be really interested to know Ben's opinion on the effect on mental health due to the decline in physical health, especially after people have been locked up for a year. Does Ben prioritise mental health over physical over mental, or in equal measure?
Hopefully some of that was covered by the last question. The fact that you've got to understand your mental, physical and social. So of course they're just as important. So when we provide training on mental health, we talk about the different experiences that you're likely to get through experiencing poor mental health. So you have the emotional side, you have the mental side, which is like your thinking process. Do you have mind fog? Are you unable to solutionize things? You just see the problems and you can't go any further. The behavioral side. So do you become angry? Do you clam up? Do you
shut
just
people out?
unresponsible?
I was going to say,
And then the physical, because you know you might sweat, you might come out in a rash. You might, your heart beats faster. You might have shortness of breath. You might even start to experience panic attacks. Those are all physical. So, of course, if you've got poor mental health, that then exposes you to poor physical health, because your physical body has to go through all these processes as well. And the same with physical health. If you have poor physical health, it's going to affect your mental health. You can't do the things that you would normally do. So if this person is referring to lockdown in a country where it's been quite substantially locked down, then yeah, you might not have been able to do the things that you would normally do. Going running with a group of people, that might not have been, but that's a social activity as well as a physical activity, and generally you get good mental well-being from it because you're interacting with others. And my friend is a super keen cyclist here in the U.A.E.
Okay. And when we went into our lockdown, which again, for those listening, like the U.A.E. had an incredibly strict lockdown for 21 days. We weren't allowed out of our house. He really went through it.
Yeah.
And he actually said, he was short-tempered with his wife, with his son, and he didn't mean to be. Then he found himself being a bit retracted, because then he knew what it was about, and was trying to stop himself reacting that way.
And that's interesting, because that's the beauty of most or the common mental health problems, is they're usually things that the people experiencing can identify. Like, a lot of people don't, and they don't see themselves doing that. It takes someone else to do it, but we should be able to, because the common mental health problems like anxiety, depression, and anything that stems from those. So most things that stem from anxiety, you've got your obsessive compulsive disorder, you've got phobias, you've got PTSD, all kind of stem from the same bracket as anxiety. They're amplifications of regular emotions. So we all experience worry.
Yeah.
Stress is a normal thing that we should all experience. When it gets too overwhelming, it's too amplified, it can manifest itself as anxiety. We all experience low moods. When it becomes too much and it's amplified, and for a long period of time, it becomes depression. So it's a lot easier for us to connect with those. If we start diving into things like personality disorders and what we refer to as psychosis, so where people's reality is distorted. So schizophrenia, for example, one of the symptoms could be hallucinations. So I could see a dragon in the corner of the room. You have no idea what that feels like to me, because you've never seen what you perceive as a real dragon in the corner of the room. But if I'm talking to you about depression and talking about low mood, you can probably relate to that, because no doubt you have experienced a low mood, whether that be for 5 minutes or 5 days or 5 months. You can generally have a bit more of a concept of that.
Also, second mention of a dragon on the podcast, which is unusual.
They're fun, aren't they?
Dragons?
Yeah.
Fun?
Yeah.
What?
Well, they're not real, so talking about them is like, it's quite...
Dragons, sure, there are other things that aren't real that I would say are fun. Fairies, unicorns, Teletubbies.
They're real.
Teletubbies?
Of course they are, they're on TV.
Oh yeah, they are physically real.
They're just people in suits. Sorry kids. Sorry kids if you...
I can't... Quick side note. The year that... okay, I need to be careful. The year that one of my nephews found out that a certain person didn't exist.
Right.
I was telling said story at dinner with some friends. And I was like, oh no, you'll never guess what happened. Such and such found out that who isn't real. And there were children everywhere. It was up at the golf club here. And there were children everywhere. And all of my friends went. And there was this girl she must have been 5, just looking at me. Like that. And I was like, oh no, I've just ruined someone's life. Turns out she was staring at another kid behind me. And then she just went running off and then carried on. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, but by telling that story now, unless you edit it out, you probably have some people listening going, it was her.
No.
When my kid came home saying that from Arabian Ranches. I
was going to do a northern accent then. There was a lady at golf club. Mummy, Is such and such not real? Because that really loud lady said so. Why am I from Yorkshire?
You always are.
I usually am, aren't I? Apologies. Anyway, I've made very light of your very serious point there, but welcome.
I can't even remember what question.
You were talking about psychosis and those when it sort of goes on and how some things you can empathise with or try to understand.
Easier.
Yeah, and there are some that you just can't even begin to understand.
And that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
When you're speaking to people, I have no idea what you might be going through right now.
Please help me try to understand, and then I can try to help you.
Yeah, not even like help me understand. It's just tell me how you're feeling. Tell me how you're experiencing this, and once again, just listen to understand that person and hear what they're saying, rather than think you need to give some answer or.
And that's really key. You're not there to. That's so key that you've said that, and I think that's a real takeaway from today's episode. Is you're not there to help, but if you know, you can be there to recommend what I don't know, like point them in the right direction.
Yeah, I'd say you are there to help because you should be helping the person by listening.
Okay.
But you're not there to solve the problem. So you may solve the problem by listening to them.
Absolute hero.
They make it, and it's just like, all right, that was easy enough. I thought it'd be a lot more difficult. And again, I've received that as feedback from people all over. You know, it's not just people in the UK. It's not just people here. You know, well, internationally now, I can say. But people say, I implemented some of the tools and I realised it was easier than I thought and it wasn't as bad. You know, people are fearful of having these conversations because what if I say the wrong thing? Well, do you know what? Most of the time, you're not going to say the wrong thing. You might feel like you upset someone, but again, that might be because they're speaking about things that are going to upset them. If you come from that place where you want to help that person, it's a lot more difficult for someone to kind of have a go at you and take it out on you. But do kind of take that step back. You know, some people may respond in that way. Some people may go on the defensive with you. Don't respond to that in the thing. It's like, I'm just trying to help you. Don't go on the defensive as well. Just, you know, take a step back. Understand that might be their process. That they're just a little bit fearful themselves. You know, I don't really want to talk about this yet, and you're kind of bringing this out from me. But go back to it. So even if you just go, do you know, I'm just trying to help and support you. I'm sorry if it's made you feel this way. That wasn't my intention. I'm just here to support. It might be that it goes away for a while. Then reach out to that person again. Like, don't think I'm not going back there because of what they did, because in a few days' time, a week's time, that person might feel very differently and think, do you know what? They were trying to help me. And
I think it's quite similar, and again, this is why with this episode of the podcast is slightly different, but where I think it's so important because of the common sort of underlying thread is that same as when a lot of my guests have said people who will offer to help if they've lost a loved one, for example, 99% of the time, sometimes 99% of the time, it will be well received because you know it's from a good place. Yeah. Yes, there might be times when you say, is there anything I can do to help? And they say, I don't want to talk about it. And they could react like that, of course, because it's bringing up this raw emotion. But it actually seems to be, again, a common thread that's quite rare.
Just one extra thing that I think you mentioned it on one of the other podcasts. I think it was with was it Ainsleen from Lighthouse? Ashleen, sorry.
Good old Irish name that's spelled actually quite how it sounds. It's unsurprising. There's no V's or P's in there.
But I think you said you might say something somewhere. I think you were talking about your loss. And then they come out and say about their loss. And you go, well, I don't care. Yeah. You know, I don't care about yours. I'm trying to... And it's the same with mental health. Try not to, unless that person asks you, you know, have you got any experience of this, to put your own thing, is because... 9 times out of 10, people don't want to hear about your problems. No. They're trying to just get off their chest their problems. So try and hold back, because again, we tend to listen to respond, because it's how you say something, I say something back. That's how we think a conversation goes. It is generally. But with mental health conversations, just listen and take it in, and just, you know, use your verbal nods. And yes,
I think that's a common misconception, because I think, and again, I am very guilty of doing that, which is weird considering how I've said that with regards to loss. But in terms of this, I would 100% say, I understand what you're going through. I had the same thing when such and such did such and such. And it's a bizarre thing.
But again, I think the same bit of the conversation was you don't know what that person. So you can't say, I understand.
No.
Because even though it could be, 2 losses, the loss of a dad, the loss of your dad to you is very different from the loss of someone else's. And it's the same. Like, you might have experienced depression or anxiety or just workplace stress. You could have experienced those, but you've no concept whether yours is exactly the same as theirs. So don't ever say, I understand what you're going through, because you probably don't. If they say, do you know what I'm talking about? And you go, well, I've experienced this myself. This is how I felt. I don't know if that's the same or not. Then that person might go, yeah, do you know what? It is kind of the same. Well, would you like me to tell you what I did to help me through that? That might help me. Or, no, do you know what? I'm not interested. Yeah. But it's very rare that you'll get someone go, no, don't tell me how you dealt with something that's similar to mine. Yeah. I want to know that to try and get through this. So again, just don't get to that point where you try and push it on someone to go, this is what you need to do, because, everything is different to
listen to respond, and don't listen to respond. Listen to understand is again massive takeaway. Even for me, like genuinely, I'm learning a lot. Side note is that is something whether it's come from age, experience, I don't know. I am still very aware of it. At school, I was called Jackanory because I like to tell a story.
Really?
You are very sarcastic, Ben. Love a story, me. If my
telling one.
Yes, telling one. My friend Peter Smithson, he's like, oh, is this a story? Is this another story? But sometimes and this is nothing to do with mental health or grief or whatever, but what I mean is the whole listen to understand as opposed to respond is sometimes I'm genuinely like listening to a story and I'm really interested in that story, but I'm just going, I had that same thing happen to me and I can't wait to tell them. And I do still catch myself going, okay, well, I'll just let them finish this story.
I'll let them finish this time.
No, but
instead of interrupting them, go, wait, forget what you were saying. I've got something. Now you'll let them finish.
But as opposed to, even after they finish, I'll just comment on their story and then get on with our day, as opposed to going, I just can't wait to tell them my story. Question number 7. I've recently had a baby, and after 2 weeks paternity leave, I've gone back to work. Since being back, I've been struggling with anxiety at work, which is affecting how I am also at home. Can you recommend any techniques I can use to help manage this? Ooh, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, it is. I was going to say what's nice about this, not that it's a nice situation, but nice that this person has felt comfortable doing it, is there is very little thought and support that's given to men during pregnancy, birth, loss, miscarriage, and things like that. And there is quite a few companies now that are starting to offer leave to both male and female when they experience miscarriage. And it's nice that this kind of thing is starting to come forward, but also that it's very common. I think it's 1 in 8 women experience postpartum depression. Okay. So again, that's something that is relatively normal to experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
1 in 8.
Yeah.
But again, it's quite common for men to experience similar emotions, and it's because you're going through a huge change. And after 2 weeks, of course, like, there might be completely different things that are important to you or no longer important to you. And the difficulty with this is because there's lots of kind of things that attribute to anxiety. I don't particularly know what is causing the anxiety, which is probably something you need to look at addressing. But of course, you don't want this manifesting itself at home, especially with this situation. You don't want to be bringing in something like that where you've got a newborn baby, a wife that's probably experiencing a whole load of physical and emotional stress. So in that respect, I'd say yes, there are tools, of course. One thing that is really good is to keep a journal of what kind of things are causing that anxiety.
Okay.
So identifying throughout the day what that thought is that's generating the anxiety. So maybe it be, I'm just going to go completely generic. Rather than, it could be, I've got a presentation to deliver in 2 days and it's going to go absolutely awful. So that's the thought, that your presentation. Okay, what behavior is that causing in you? So am I starting to sweat? Am I starting to get a racing heart, sweaty palms? It could just be that I have a shortness of breath. So starting to identify what thought came into your head, what behaviors you feel you're demonstrating, what physical things are happening to you. Do you identify any behaviors that you're doing? So are you becoming more snappy at people? Are you becoming more withdrawn? And being able to identify those things and then assign yourself a stress level, because anxiety is a manifestation of stress.
So you're saying make a note of this each day, a stress
level.
level.
When anything happens to you that you experience that, and then use a scale of like 1 to 10 or 1 to 100 and go, how anxious am I feeling on the basis of that thought? So maybe I think, it's maybe a 3 or a 30, I don't know. And then just keep a note. And what you're able to do then is to recognize the thoughts that come into your head that might cause you the most stress. They're the ones that you need to focus on and think, how can I prevent myself in the best possible way experiencing this situation? So is it that I need to implement a distraction technique, or do I need to take that moment where I do some mindfulness? And again, I'm not talking about meditation with mindfulness. It might just be that you need to take 5 minutes where you solely focus on what's happening now in the present. So take a moment where you close your eyes, so you shut yourself off from any visual distractions. How does your legs and bum feel on your seat? Get your body thinking about just what's happening right now. It's often to focus on your breathing, because by just focusing on that, you no longer think about what's going to happen or what has happened.
Keeping that little GIF, the GIF that goes like that triangle that goes kind of in and out, and it's that timing.
Oh, yeah. And
that's I've genuinely used that.
Yeah, and just focusing on something that's breathing in the moment just helps recenter yourself, and then you can tackle the problem. Because again, I mentioned before about some of the mental issues that come about with mental health. It's like you might struggle to come up with a solution. You might just be totally focused on the problem. So if you do take that moment to kind of just, all right, breathe, recenter myself, it's often a lot easier to think of a solution. So keep a journal so that you can track how you feel in different situations. That's probably a good little tool to do.
You've mentioned that, all of those things you've mentioned, I think a lot of people experience. PowerPoint stress anybody out, but all of that kind of anxiety could be experienced by people who are then not going home to a newborn baby and a new mum. Yeah. So that's just magnifies it so much.
And again, it's just because I don't know what's causing that person's anxiety to give a more like that. Again, I'm not an expert to say this is how it's going to work.
No, of course. Speak to your partner.
Oh yeah, of course.
I guess would be again, I'm not a therapist, but that would be one of the first things. Where is there I've kind of thrown you off here slightly, but where this person has said, do you have any techniques to manage this? Is there somewhere, a website that you would recommend to go and find that, or?
I always recommend seeking out any mental health website. So whether it's one that you want to go to that's from your home country, if they have them. So again, unfortunately in the Middle East there's not a lot of mental health information and support web pages. So there is one that I know of here, mentalhealth.ae, which has some information about mental health problems, so at least you can get some signs and symptoms. I haven't checked on it recently, so I don't know whether they do have any particular support mechanisms there, but again, because charity is a bit different over here, there's not a lot. But then access all the ones that do exist elsewhere in the world. Go to the ones in Australia, in the US, UK. If there's different countries that speak your language that isn't yours, and just go to them and visit them and see what help they do have, because most of them do have tools that you can use from the website.
What would you Google for that?
Like Mental Health UK, Mental Health USA.
But like in terms of techniques, like, I don't know, techniques for managing anxiety, is that something that you can Google?
You can, but then with anything that you Google, you've just got to make sure that it is some form of reputable site. You know, you can find yourself going down a wormhole of find information and forums of what people think are the right things. So you've got to be very careful about what you do, which is why I'd probably say look for the overarching element of mental health support in the country that you're looking for, the language that you'll understand, and then go from there and see what support bits they have. Time to Change is used to be a UK based thing, but is now like a global initiative as well. So they have quite a few helping supports, whether it would be specific on that element there, but if you're savvy about it and can make sure that you whittle out some of the rubbish that does exist on the internet, there is lots of help and support. So even something as simple as used by professionals all over it, you've got the GAD-7 questionnaire, which is General Anxiety Disorder 7, because it's 7 questions. That is used by professionals to assess what level of anxiety you might be going through. So again, as I mentioned before, caveat, it's not a diagnosis tool, so it doesn't mean that if you get the highest rating, it doesn't mean you definitely have anxiety, because there's a lot more factors that go in, but it's a good indication of how you might be feeling at this moment. So again, that's another thing that we suggest, to use those tools for yourself, or to, if you're confident speaking with a colleague or a partner, let's just go through these questions even together and let's see where we are. And they give a good indicator about, like, 1 to 7, a score of 1 to 7 might be low anxiety. 8 to something might be mild anxiety. Most people face this. Above 12 or 13 might be, this is a level where you might need to introduce some support for yourself. It might be, I can't remember what the score is, maybe 16 and above or something, is like you might need to seek professional help to
GAD-7, GAD-7.
General Anxiety Disorder 7. But again, they're freely available. You can type them in, and there's loads of websites that have those on,
and I love a quiz online, me.
Not that kind of thing.
What Friends character are you? Last question.
Come on.
How can I deal with a boss who has anger issues as it's really getting to me? Wow, that is literally what it says.
All right, so not really mental health, but it might be causing potential mental health persons for that person for experiencing that's
written.
But if you feel comfortable, tell that manager how that makes you feel. You know, what are you experiencing on the other side of that?
As opposed to just, don't shout at me.
Yeah, because again, what you've got to remember is, even from a general perspective of conversing with someone, the moment you start to say, don't do this, or go on the defensive, it immediately creates a defensive element in the other person. So your behaviour creates an impact to that person. They show a behaviour that they feel is representative towards that. If you approach something with more of a calming nature, you know, I used to do loads of training for people working in telesales and the phones and stuff, and working where you're trying to recover money from people, you're obviously going to get a lot of backlash. So use that principle. If you're calm all the time, it's very difficult for someone to continually be angry at you, because a calming nature generally breeds more calming nature. But just
write that down.
Identify to you might not feel comfortable doing so, but again, you've got to tell them what that is doing to you, and maybe other people in the business as well. If they are constantly showing anger, that could be having a massive effect on the other people in the business. So it's feedback ultimately, and again, it's something that not a lot of people feel comfortable doing,
and especially giving to your manager.
But everyone is entitled to feedback. It's what they do with it. So that boss might not care and just go, I'm not bothered. If if I'm being angry, then there's a reason for it, and you need to deal with it. I don't know.
I guess then based on that reaction, going back to what you said, you then need to ultimately look after number one.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to take those steps and they say, I don't care, I'm going to continue shouting, or it's my business, or something like that, then I think it's then for you to go, well, do you know what? Then that's
is it worth your time? And that's going to put you through stress. And of course that. So is it worth it? You know, put it into perspective. Do I really want to be exposed to this level? Do I want someone who's angry at me all the time? Probably not.
Absolutely
and if you
not.
do, then all right, if you enjoy that, great. You know,
whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, exactly. But just the least you can do is explain to that person. You know, maybe give it a bit of time after they've been angry or shown something, and just go, I just want to refer you back to this situation. Maybe it was a meeting or whatever. Again,
go with examples.
You did this. This is what I saw. Again, so you're not just saying you were dead horrible, because that person might go, well, I didn't mean to be horrible. That's how you perceived it. So again, don't go with perceptions, go with behaviours that you saw. This is how it made me feel. And the difficulty with that is because when you say to someone, this is how it made me feel, they can't argue with that.
No.
Because it's your feelings.
Correct. Yeah.
So they might go, what do you mean you felt like this, blah, 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 and potentially go into angry mode again, or they might realise that. But again, you can kind of take that step back and just go, it's just how it made me feel. You might have not wanted to create that. It might have been accidental. It might have been on purpose. I just want you to know that that's how it made me feel, and I'd prefer if you handled things a different way, or you might get a better response from people if you behave in this manner. We might be more responsive as a group.
Developmental feedback.
And
interestingly, it could be something going on in their life.
That's very much
them feel like that. Ben, it's been about 400 years, this podcast, and that's my fault.
Is it?
Yeah, it is, because I keep going off on tangents. So I'm gonna wrap up the Q&A there.
Right.
For a number of reasons. I can't edit anymore. I always ask all of my guests for a podcast or an Instagram recommendation that could be completely unrelated to what we're talking about, but it's something that you enjoy. I asked you for a podcast or Instagram recommendation, and you told me that all you follow on Instagram is breweries.
Yeah.
But aside from your brewery Instagram accounts, you said you were going to bring books and recommend books instead.
Yeah. Obviously talking about mental health and stuff. These are my books. Look, post-it notes where things are thinking. So I don't know this person, so it's not that I'm just thinking them. But A Beginner's Guide to Being Mental, an A to Z.
Okay.
So
by Natasha Devon.
Yeah. So from anxiety to 0 F's given. And Natasha Devon is the author of this, and I would thoroughly recommend this to understand everything about mental health that's worthwhile knowing in a very light-hearted way. And
it's interesting, if you're listening rather than looking on YouTube, it's not a thick book.
No.
Do you know what I mean? It's some of these
264 pages.
Hello. Yeah. 264 pages. But I books intimidate me. Okay. Full disclosure. The other book that you've got, we'll talk about, I wouldn't even pick up. That looks awful. Because books intimidate me. The other one looks like it's a readable book.
Yeah, so this one is the Cbt Handbook. So if you don't know, Cbt is cognitive behavioural therapy.
Okay.
So again, you generally need to be certified to deliver this. So again, it's a counsellor's or a therapist's tool. But you can do this online as well, not to be certified. Well, I suppose you can. I've not looked into it, but there is CBT tools that you can do as a person that needs that help. So more and more common in the mental health space is realizing that talking therapy is very effective.
Yeah.
So where some people might have the misconception that if you are diagnosed with mental health, you're given medication, things like that, that's not always the case. A lot of people can be helped and supported with talking therapy, which isn't always CBT. It's one of them. But yes, it is a handbook. It is ridiculously think, or so it seems. This is by Pamela Miles and Ros Shafran.
How many pages is it?
Sorry, I'll just have a quick look. I can't include the index.
No.
Sorry. Or the appendices.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm still going back, and it's at the top right. Sorry, I can include those things. I was just looking at the bottom. 521, 22, 23,
Hello.
524. Keep counting. But the difference with this is, so in terms of information, we're probably looking at about 400 pages.
Okay.
And what's great about this is you can just go to the bit that you want to look at. So it's
say,
not that you have to go through it. Yeah,
book.
it's not an adventure story.
It's not Dungeons and Dragons.
No, you don't have to go from the start, otherwise you don't know where you're picking up from. But regularly throughout it, sorry, if you're just a listener and not a viewer, there is, I don't know whether people can see that far back, but there's a lot of tools, tabular things where you can go, I can use that
easy
physically today, and just opening this page, it's like another anxiety tool.
Really?
So I've got the GAD-7 here.
How
so
funny.
Again, a lot of it is that, and it's, even if you read through a particular bit, it'll give you a bit of information about it. There's case studies, so you can see how it's affected other people. And then there are tools to help you. So just looking through this bit. So self-esteem issues. So there's a case illustration.
Don't open that box.
What causes it? What are the signs and symptoms? And then what are ways in which you can help? And it relates it back to the case study. So what would help this person? So
I
it's
think this
nice
would actually,
that it's...
Sorry, I think this would actually be useful for the person that messaged in saying they're a small business owner.
Yeah, just see what tools. And again, the
person
that asked about experiencing anxiety after returning from paternity leave, there is lots of really good tools in that. And one of the things that is in this is the thanks Poppy, is the tool that we were talking about before about understanding what emotions are you experiencing. Tools which can help and support you is very much in that handbook. So they're my go-to books all the time.
They're good. I like that. I like that a lot. Gosh, this is such an intellectual podcast that we're now recommending books. Wow. I'm so pleased with myself.
Is this the first recommending books?
Yeah.
Am I the intellect bringing books to the conversation?
I mean, again, don't blow your own trumpet, but you're just a maverick because I asked for a podcast on Instagram and you were like, I can give you a book.
More like a Luddite. That's what it is. Can I bring a book?
Luddite?
It's like someone that doesn't move with the times and likes to stay in all the older bits.
Gosh, I used to work with one of those.
So use all the old tools.
Ben Edwards, thank you very much.
Right.
Genuinely, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that Poppy beat you. And she didn't actually hurt you, did she?
I'm just bleeding.
No, don't. Stop
it's
trying
fine.
to get somewhere.
No.
Thank you very much. If you have been affected by anything that Ben or I have spoken about today, as we went into great depths, we're not professionals, but I do believe Ben is well versed and an expert in this field. So if you have been affected by anything, or you have any other questions for Ben, please do reach out. He's not on Instagram, but I'll put down Ignite Training's Instagram as well. And if there's a question you would like me to...
LinkedIn,
I
suppose.
LinkedIn, yeah. Oh, yeah, I can do that. I will, feel free to reach out. It can be anonymous for sure, like whatever. So, subscribe, give me a review. Not personally, that's... Don't go there again. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks.